There is a moment in life that comes quietly without warning, where you wake up and something feels fundamentally wrong, though you cannot name it. It is not illness in the conventional sense. It is not sadness that you could identify and say, yes, I am grieving, or yes, I have lost something. It is something stranger than that, something that sits in your chest like a stone that has no weight, but somehow anchors you to the bed in the morning. It is a feeling so subtle and so pervasive that you might spend weeks or months not even recognizing it as a feeling at all. You find yourself wanting to stay in bed, not because you are tired in the way exhaustion makes you tired, where your body demands rest and sleep comes easy and natural. You want to stay in bed because the thought of getting up, of moving through the world, of engaging with other people and their expectations and their rhythms and their constant need for you to be present and functional and engaged feels like lifting an impossible weight. And here is where it becomes insidious and strange. You do not feel depressed, not in any dramatic way that you could point to and say, this is depression. You are not crying. You are not thinking dark thoughts in the way people describe depression when they speak of it. Instead, there is simply a flatness, a kind of emotional distance from everything that used to matter, everything that used to pull you forward with some kind of internal magnetism. Your phone lights up with messages, and you read them and feel almost nothing, or you feel a faint obligation that feels heavier than affection ever did. A friend tells you something exciting about their life and you respond appropriately. You say the right words, you make the appropriate sounds, but inside there is only an echo chamber of silence where emotion should be, where enthusiasm should live. You go through the day and nothing feels truly bad in an acute way, but nothing feels truly good either. There is a persistent sense that you are watching your life from behind glass, present in your body, but not quite participating in the meaning of anything. And the most disturbing part is that you do not feel particularly disturbed about it. This is the moment where you begin to ask questions that keep you awake at night in a different way, questions that gnaw at you in the quiet hours. You begin to wonder if you have become a cold person, if something inside you has broken and calcified and will never be fixed. You wonder if you are always like this, underneath the social performance, underneath the mask of warmth that you learned to wear, and you are only now seeing your true nature. You begin to suspect yourself in a way that feels like betrayal. Perhaps you are incapable of genuine connection. Perhaps you have always been somewhat arrogant, somewhat selfish, somewhat narcissistic in ways you could not see before, and the empathy you thought you had was only a sophisticated mask, a habit, something you learned to do because it was required for social survival. You start examining your own heart like a detective looking for evidence of your own guilt, and the more you examine it, the more you cannot find the evidence of feeling you used to take for granted, the warmth you used to feel so easily. This is where fear enters, real fear, not the fear of something external that can be avoided or fought or reasoned with, but the fear of yourself, the fear that you have become emotionally hollow, that you are broken in a way that no amount of effort or therapy or self-help or medication can repair. You might tell yourself that you need to try harder, to push yourself more, to get back to the way you were, not understanding that the way you were depended entirely on not seeing something, and now that you are seeing it, now that you cannot unsee it, there is no going back through ignorance. And then gradually something shifts in how you perceive this whole thing. It is not a dramatic shift, and it does not come with fanfare or revelation or any kind of clarity that feels victorious. It comes more like a slow recognition, a settling into a different way of understanding what is happening to you, a kind of internal permission. What if this is not a breakdown? What if this is not evidence of your fundamental emptiness, or your hidden darkness, or some essential weakness that has always been there? What if this is instead the beginning of something that had to happen, an inevitable transition that the human psyche goes through when it reaches a certain threshold of consciousness, when the mind becomes too aware to continue in the old comfortable sleep? What if the flatness you are experiencing, the emotional distance, the loss of interest in things that used to stimulate and excite you, is not the death of your capacity to feel, but rather a kind of withdrawal, a necessary pause while your consciousness reorganizes itself at a deeper level, while it prepares to see things as they actually are, rather than as you have been conditioned to see them? Think of consciousness like a building that was constructed a long time ago, when you were very young, without your conscious participation. It was built by your family, by your culture, by your earliest experiences, by the accidents of your birth and circumstance. And you lived inside this building without ever questioning its architecture or its fundamental design. The building had rooms and corridors and windows placed in specific places, and light came through in predictable ways, and you learned to move through it without thinking, moving through rooms you did not design, following paths you did not choose. You became efficient at living in this building, almost like a creature born to live in it. You learned which switches turned on which lights, which doors led where, which paths would gain you approval, and which would bring rejection and pain. For years, perhaps decades, you simply inhabited this structure without question, and this felt safe because it was all you knew. But at some point, something changed. You grew tall enough that your head touched the ceiling. Or you stood in one room and looked around and noticed that the walls were made of something you had always assumed was solid and real. But now you could see the seams, the joints, the places where it had been constructed. Or you stood in a room and suddenly realized that this room had no windows to the outside world, only mirrors reflecting other rooms back at you, and you had been walking in circles, thinking you were moving forward. This is when the building begins to feel like a prison, not because it changed, but because you changed. You became aware of its boundaries. You became aware that you were inside something, and the feeling of wanting to stay in bed, the emotional flatness, the sense of watching your life from behind glass, the inability to muster enthusiasm for things that once felt important. This is what happens when your old consciousness, the one that was built for you, the one that was never actually yours, begins to dissolve before your new consciousness, the one that can see the building itself, that can step outside it even partially, has fully formed. It is like you are between two states of being, suspended in a between space, and in that between space, there is no solid ground under your feet. There is no comfortable position. The old ways of feeling, the old ways of being motivated by fear and desire, and the need for external validation, the old ways of finding meaning through stimulation and achievement, and social approval, and the accumulation of things and experiences, these things lose their power because you can now see the mechanism behind them. You can see the puppet strings. You can see how the theater works. And a puppet cannot feel the same way once it has seen its own strings. A person cannot feel excitement about a show once they understand exactly how the illusion is created. You cannot unsee a mechanism once you have understood it. So there is a kind of mourning happening beneath the surface, a kind of death, a kind of grief for the innocence you can never recover. And it makes sense that you would want to lie in bed, that you would feel no urgency to move, that the things that used to pull you forward with excitement and hunger now feel hollow and performative and like a game you no longer want to play. And here is something that needs to be said clearly, something that needs to land in you completely. This is not weakness. This is not failure. This is not evidence that you are broken or sick or fundamentally damaged or defective in some way. This is the sound of your consciousness refusing to continue operating at the level it was operating before. This is the signal that something in you has become too aware, too lucid, too conscious to continue living in the old automatic way, the way that required you to not think too deeply about what you were doing or why you were doing it. This is what it feels like when the mind refuses to go back to sleep. It is like reaching the end of a tunnel that you did not know you were in, and for a moment, before your eyes adjust to the new light, before your mind can make sense of the new landscape, you stand in the darkness between the old world and the new one, and it feels like there is nothing to hold on to. The numbness you feel, the distance, the flatness, the seeming emptiness, the loss of taste for things that once tasted sweet, these are not the final state. They are transition symptoms. They are what it looks like when a consciousness is shedding a skin that no longer fits, when it is outgrowing a form of being that has become too small. The caterpillar in its cocoon does not feel like the caterpillar that existed before, and it does not yet feel like the butterfly it will become. For a time, it is neither thing, and in that neither space, in that strange suspension, there is only dissolution and darkness and a kind of profound waiting. There is only the dissolution of the old form and the slow emergence of something new. You have been living in a kind of pleasant intoxication, an enchanted dream that you did not know was a dream. And what you are experiencing now is the beginning of sobriety, the first moments of waking. The world does not change when you become sober. The same people are around you, the same situations exist, the same structures of society and work and relationship continue on, but they lose their numbing power. You see the patterns more clearly. You notice the manipulation in advertisements and in social discourse. You see the fear in other people that makes them seek constant stimulation, constant validation, constant proof that they exist and matter and are worthy of being alive. You see the theater of it all, and theater cannot excite you in the same way once you have seen the stage and the ropes and the people operating the lights behind the curtain. This is not superiority. This is not elevation. This is simply clarity, and clarity has a price, and the price is that you can no longer be as easily satisfied, as easily moved, as easily distracted by the ordinary mechanisms of comfort and pleasure that kept you content before. But there is something else beneath this clarity, something that begins to emerge as you sit with this transition long enough to stop fighting it, long enough to stop trying to get back what you have lost. There is a different kind of contentment, quieter than excitement but deeper and more stable, and more. There is a different kind of engagement with life, one that is not driven by the hunger for stimulation, but by something else entirely, something that does not need to announce itself or validate itself through external response or approval from others. But you must be careful here, because there is a particular danger that awaits you in this transition, and it is a danger that masquerades as wisdom, that wears the face of insight. It is the danger of using this new clarity as a new form of superiority, a new way to feel separate and elevated from others, a new justification for coldness and judgment and distance. It is easy, once you have seen the mechanisms, once you can see how the game works, to become hard, to decide that everyone still caught in the illusion is somehow less awake, less evolved, less real, less conscious than you. It is easy to mistake clarity for transcendence, to mistake the ability to see the puppet strings for the ability to exist beyond them, to have conquered something that everyone else is still enslaved by. It is easy to become arrogant about your wakefulness, but you are not beyond the puppet strings. You are not free from the mechanisms. You are simply a puppet that has become aware of being a puppet, which is a different thing entirely, which is not the same as transcendence. You still need food, still need connection, still need meaning, still need to matter to someone. The mechanisms that you now see are not suddenly invalid just because you can see them. They are simply visible. They are simply transparent. And the people around you who are still caught in the pleasure of the theater, who still feel excitement at the show, who still respond with genuine enthusiasm to things that you can now see the mechanics of, they are not stupid or asleep in any moral sense. They are not inferior. They are simply at a different place in their own awakening, in their own journey toward consciousness. Your clarity is not their awakening. Your vision is not their salvation. Your ability to see the tricks is not their responsibility. And if you use this new awareness as a weapon against them, if you let it make you harsh and separate and untouchable and superior, if you decide that you are awake and they are sleeping and therefore different in some essential way, then you have only traded one intoxication for another, one form of sleep for another form of sleep, one egoic position for another egoic position. There is also the risk of mistaking this transition for permanence, of deciding that this flatness, this distance, this emotional restraint, this inability to feel as deeply as you once did, is the final destination, is what it means to be awake and aware and conscious. But it is not the destination, it is not the goal, it is not the prize, it is the valley between two mountains. It is the darkness between one dawn and another. And as you move through this valley, as you continue to sit with the dissolution and the waiting and the strangeness of it all, something else begins to happen, something subtle and quiet. You begin to notice that there are still moments of genuine pleasure, but they are different now, different in texture and quality. They are quieter. They do not require as much stimulation. They do not demand as much. You feel pleasure in a conversation that is real, in silence with another person who you do not need to perform for, in work that you do for its own sake rather than for the external reward it brings. You feel something that is not excitement, not the rush, not the spike of dopamine, but is perhaps deeper than excitement, a kind of resonance, a kind of knowing that you are alive, and that aliveness does not need to scream. You begin to understand that what you thought was the goal, all that stimulation and achievement, and the constant seeking for more and better and different and newer, that was the symptom, not the cure. And the quiet, the stillness, the ability to want nothing in particular, and therefore to receive what comes with open hands rather than grasping hands, with receptivity rather than hunger, This is closer to what you were actually searching for all along, even if you did not know it, even if you thought what you wanted was excitement. And so you lie in bed sometimes, or you move through the world, and there is less urgency but also less anxiety. There is less excitement but also less disappointment, less the feeling of things never being quite right. There is less the feeling of being perpetually incomplete and about to be satisfied. If you could only do the right thing or reach the right achievement or find the right person or accumulate the right experiences. There is more of a sense that you are complete now, not because you have achieved something or become something or transformed into a better version of yourself, but because you have stopped the endless internal conversation about whether you are complete, whether you are enough, whether you are doing this right. There is a quiet acceptance of what is, and this is not a triumph. This is not an achievement to be celebrated or displayed or posted about. This is not something that makes you special or elevated or worthy of admiration. It is simply a settling, a return, a different way of inhabiting the body and the life that you have always had but could not fully appreciate because you were too busy trying to become someone else, too busy fleeing from who you were. The desire to stay in bed all day fades not because you become suddenly motivated and full of energy and vitality, not because you wake up with excitement and purpose, but because staying in bed loses the appeal of being an escape. It becomes what it is: rest, sometimes needed, sometimes not. And you can move or stay still with the same indifference, the same simple presence, the same quiet awareness that you are here. You are alive, and you are not broken. You were never broken. You were only waking up, and the waking is still happening, and it will keep happening, and you do not need to do anything about it except let it.